because Tuesday is so amazing and we are such a wonderful committee, we are running ahead of schedule. And so we're going to pick up the update on school budgets. And just to keep everyone on their toes, instead of having Brad go first and then Julia, we're going to have Julia go first and then Brad.
Oh, no.
Always
I can't.
things to learn here. So Julia, if you could join us, thank you.
Hello, for the record, I'm Julia Richter with the Joint Fiscal Office. Madam Chair, did you want me to share my screen or did you want to?
I would love if you could share your screen and then talk us through this newest version of the Ed Fund Outlook. I asked Julia to add in one new revenue source, which is the repealing the exemption on, what's the technical term for it?
Pre-written software accessed remotely.
Thank you.
Cloud tax.
I was trying to be official there for a minute. To put that revenue source in to see sort of how it balances everything back out again. So if you want to take us through that, Julia.
Sure. So this document is under my name on the committee's page. Should look really familiar. I will note that there hasn't been any adjustments to the spending, education spending, budget data that we've been getting from Brad. I'm going to wait until after town meeting day to update the model all at once so we can compare across the same scenarios, compare apples to apples. So what we have here, columns A and B should look familiar. We've looked at them a lot before. So column A, that's just the FY 2023 projected, the current fiscal year. And column B, this is capturing the scenario that we've looked at before. So this is including updates to governor's rec categorical aid, universal school meals, and the tax rate offset reserve that currently has 50 million set aside there. As the chair mentioned, column C, the only difference between column C is that now we're adding in the sales and use tax on pre-written software accessed remotely. So that's repealing of that exemption, which we estimate to be 16.9 million for the coming fiscal year 2024. And so when we put in that additional revenue source, that's why we see the rates coming down and the yields coming up. So that 16.9 million you can see in line 3A, and everything else in here is equal with the exception that the property tax now is different because with adding in the expanded sales and use tax or repeal of the exemption, less needs to be raised by property taxes. So we see the uniform non-homestead rate drop from 1.42 to 1.404. And the property yield going up from 15,1112 to 15,290. And the income yield going up from 17,159 to 17,372. And of course, we've got that average percentage bill change compared to the prior year that we've been looking at. Recall that that's across all three categories, the non-homestead, homestead, and income. So that's quick rundown of what we're looking at here. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So just I think what it says here is that, at least at this point in time, Julia, you're still using the same education spending that was projected in the tax letter.
That is correct.
Okay.
So assuming that the budget data, I know Brad's going to be coming in more later, but assuming that the budget data does in fact, after town meeting, the voted town budget, school budgets are a little bit lower than was initially forecasted. That means that education payment will also decrease. I don't know by what factor. I would defer to Brad on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Representative. Thank you. There was some unspent money for special education that we heard about quite a bit ago. Where is that here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if we scroll down, we see that the prior year reversions, so that's in line 24, that's 45.5 million. A large chunk of that was those special ed dollars that were reverted back to the education fund. Those reversions are falling to the bottom line, falling into the unreserved, unallocated. And so then they're carrying forward into the fiscal year 24 that we're looking at and being used to fund all of the expenses in the ed fund. So they're captured in all of the swirl that we've going on here.
Am I right when you said because they're originally categorical, they remain categorical as unspent?
That's a great question. So because they're prior year reversions, AOE is saying, okay, the dollars have been appropriated for special ed as categorical aid, but we didn't spend them. So now they're reverting those dollars back to the education fund so that they can be reappropriated in whatever manner the General Assembly.
So they're no longer restricted as they once were?
Correct.
Ah, interesting. Thank you.
And the education committee has spent, I think, a significant amount of time understanding the nature of the reversions and what they say about service delivery and conversations with AOE about all of that. And I'm happy to have someone from the education committee come tell us about that if people need that at any point. Other thoughts or questions? Yeah,
One
Representative
more
Bodie.
quick question.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's line 24, 23, can you just?
Sure. So line 23, that's talking about the difference that we're seeing in lines 9 and lines 22. So that's the difference between the total sources and the total uses. So what we're seeing here is that it's saying that there's a revenue deficit, meaning that the total sources are less than the total uses. But the education fund is still balanced, as we're seeing here on the bottom line. And that's in large part because of these unreserved, unallocated dollars being used to cover that delta, that difference in the sources and the expenditures.
And what was it that was unspent in special ed again? Was it 27 or 24?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but all of the AOE reversions were a total of 45.5 million, and a portion of those 45.5 million were special education dollars that were unspent. But there were other dollars that were being reverted back to the education fund on top of the special ed.
Thank you, great. I can look that up.
Yeah, Representative Taylor.
So there's still 98 million in, as prior years, unallocated at the bottom?
So another great question. So this number that we're looking at here in line 35, 98.58 million, that's saying at the close or projected at the close of fiscal year 2023, we're going to see 98.58 million that is unreserved, unallocated. And that's in large part due to the performance of the non-property tax revenue sources and growth in the grand list. So that's talking about what did we have at the close of what are we thinking we're going to have at the close of the fiscal year, but it's not talking about those $98.58 million have been spent, so to speak, in this education fund outlook. There's 0.5 million that are sitting on the bottom line that are unreserved, unallocated in the current year.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, Representative.
You said in the current year, but it's underneath C, which is 2024.
Right. So current year, when I'm talking about current year, I'm talking about fiscal year 2024. So that's correct. We are currently in fiscal year 2023, but all of these conversations that we're having of setting the yields and the rates, we're talking about what are the yields and the rates going to be for the next fiscal year.
Oh, I thought just one.
Okay.
And just
a lot to unpack in one piece of paper.
Representative Brannigan.
And just a quick question, 3A, this pre-written software assessed remotely. So that bill has not been passed yet, or has it?
That's correct. So that has not been passed. It's highlighted in blue here
Yeah.
and in italics because it's talking about a policy decision that is not in current law. So this column C is saying, okay, if this were to happen,
Yeah.
we estimate 16, and everything else were to stay the same, we estimate that $16.9 million would be coming into the education fund on top of what we're already thinking is going to be coming in sales and use tax.
And universal school meals has also not passed, and that's in this chart.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
good point.
And so this was, I asked Julie to do it because universal school meals was added to the chart that hasn't passed yet. It's on our wall. And what happens if we make up some of the difference, basically, on universal school meals by repealing an existing tax exemption.
Thank you.
I remain, I think frustrated that the average tax rate on household income goes up between column A and column C, but the average homestead rate does not.
Between A and C.
Between column, on line A, between column A and C, we see the average homestead rate go down, but we see the average household tax rate on household income go up, just a teeny, tiny, tiny bit. And I understand that's part of sort of other things in the mix.
Yeah,
Feels like with just a little bit more money, it wouldn't. How much more money would it take for the average tax rate on household income to not go up?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good question. The, as I'm sure the committee is aware, but as a reminder, we're seeing the average homestead property tax rate go down. And the average tax rate on household income go up, as the chair mentioned, because of these other factors at play. So we're seeing, property value, grand list growth. So
Yeah, that's all.
So we're seeing the rates changing in a different direction, but we're not seeing the average tax liability changing.
Yeah.
And it is a policy decision. I mean, if the committee were to decide that you wanted to see both rates going down, or you can play with the relationship between those average tax liability changes, but they've been modeled this way as they're uniform across all three classes.
Did you?
no, that was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Representative Odie.
If we were to think about doing that, could we see more data than just the average? Because the average is just the average, so we don't know what it really looks like. Like,
Can you ask? Will you add more words to your question?
yeah, good, I could tell I needed more words. So
What kind of more data would you want to see?
how do you break down when you're getting the average rate, you probably know, do you know where people live and where the rate is in each of the towns?
Yeah, so in the yield model that I've built and work off of, it's pulling in the rates, the average rate, or the homestead rates in each town, the uniform non-homestead rate, the equalized grand list value in each town. There's a lot of information that's going into the yield model, and it all impacts each other, right? Because we're in this feedback loop in the education fund. So if you were interested in seeing, in adjusting these average bill changes, I could tell you that the average bill change in income is this percentage and the average bill change in homestead is that percentage. I could certainly share that. The reason it hasn't been broken up here is because it's the same across all three categories. And the other caveat I would add to that consideration of setting the yields and the rates so that the average bill change is not uniform is that that relationship will carry into future years unless future year policymakers determine to adjust that average bill change relationship again, if that makes sense.
Will you say that one more time?
Sure. So
Different words if you want.
yeah, I can't repeat what I said exactly, but I can repeat the same message that unless I've been told otherwise, and this is everything that we've been looking at so far, we solve the yield model so that the average bill change across the three classes is the same. And that's why we're looking at in row F, just 1%. So across all three classes, in scenario C, the average bill change was an increase of about 5%. So that's the assumption. That assumption can be changed by policymakers, but I need to be told to model in a different way. So if I were to be told to model in a different way and have an average tax bill change different for folks paying a homestead property tax and a non-homestead property tax, that would be adjusting the relationship between those classes and what their bill is in the current year. So in future years, when we go back and we look at the average bill change compared to this year,
We're setting a new base almost.
exactly, yeah, thank you.
I think it's extraordinary that we have had both grand list growth and non-property revenue enough coming into the education fund that even in scenario C, we're seeing a 5% average bill change in the face of 8.5% increase in spending, in education spending. Any other thoughts from folks? Well, with that, thank you so much, Julia. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
I was just sitting there doing that.
Great.
I just finished, that was perfect time, Brad. I warmed things up for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, if not. Like some water?
No, I'm all set. Thank you very much. Had a sip as it came in. Okay. I will get organized here slowly. So.
We were just looking at a few different scenarios. We thought we would mix things up by having Julia go first, really change our lives a little bit. And we were looking at a scenario that included school meals and the new tax reserve, as well as repeal some new revenue into the ed fund. To see what would happen there.
All right, well, for the record, Brad James, Agency of Education, slightly out of breath, because it's the third floor, penthouse. So when I was in 2 weeks ago, it was Valentine's Day. Last Tuesday was Mardi Gras.
What's today?
Well, next Tuesday is a meeting. So today must be, I heard on VPR coming in, National Chili Day. Not chili like I am, oh, my finger, not like I am, but we didn't have chili, but we did have chocolate chip cookies instead. So.
Oh.
We'll go that way.
Look at this guy.
You really don't answer that one. Thank you.
Wow, you sold that in so well.
That's why I'm so tired. I'm exhausted carrying this. It's because Saoirse and the chair shamed me into it.
That is not true. Perfect.
Every single one is.
Perfect.
Maybe I should try.
Carol, I know I can't compare to you.
Sure that they're
I've
all
not seen
consistent.
anything
Aye.
worse.
Third.
Didn't bring him in.
Bill, you want, some more?
Yes, I did.
Marathon on Google Flower?
Well, today is Calvin's state meet in the classic cross-country skiing. So I made him for the team because I couldn't go. I would make
Would you like?
so.
Very nice.
Bring some.
There's enough for two for everyone.
Oh, really?
Did you go?
You don't have to leave any for Senate Finance?
No. I don't even, they don't do this
Oh.
process, Senate Finance doesn't have you in every Tuesday, right?
Yes, all right.
Just wait till we send them.
Okay. Okay. So now we've got the serious stuff out of the way. Here we are. We have lots of districts in. We're missing 6 districts, as you can see. And I threw in a note because we've never gotten to this point where we've had only 6 districts missing before. This is a first. You have about 25 districts missing. So if you're paying close attention, you'll see I'm expecting 117, we have 114 in, but we have 6 here. Hence those words there. So basically just to explain that discrepancy, in the 117 that I'm counting up at the top that we're expecting, I'm counting school districts. What I'm really, the lower number is actually budgets coming in. We have 3 modified unified school districts, okay? They each act like 2 separate school districts, but technically they're 1. So they're counted as 1 in the 117, they're counted as 2 in the 114. Just so people know, because I know you guys pick up like that otherwise.
Oh, absolutely.
I knew that. So where are we? We have them all in. The big ones are all in. I had to twist a few arms, but the big ones are all in. And we are at 7.7% over last year.
Oh, that's down.
That's down, which is always good. And I took a quick look on when I did the December 1 letter. I was projecting education spending of roughly, in round numbers, $1.711 billion. I'm estimating growing out at 7.7% at $1.698 million, so a decrease of about almost $13 million. That education spending is coming less than projected, which is good news. People have worked hard, apparently, to keep things down from what I was hearing initially, because I've heard a lot of 16%, 15%, 12%. There's still some of those out there, but some of the big ones we're talking about, that they did bring it down.
There's still a lot of need out there.
There's still a lot of need. Burlington was the one that we were worried about. I was worried about. And after I talked to you all, I went online and found their stuff and then talked to the business manager, got their stuff. And basically what Burlington did with their budget was they made the decision that they were only going to increase their budget by salaries and benefits, whether those were going up. And they weren't going to start new programs, add on to anything. If they had new positions they needed, they're going to try to do it fill this through the attrition that they have. So they actually did quite well. And plus they had that $2.1 million payment for the first year of their bond, which I think is just interest. I think if I remember how those things work. And the next one will be bigger, but the first one's about 2.1 million.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, who is this?
Burlington.
Then do you, in your conversations, did it sound like they were doing that this year because they know that in next year and the year after, they're not going to do that?
No, I mean, I didn't talk to them about it. I was just kind of reading what they had posted online. I haven't had a chance to talk to Nathan a whole lot about it, or anybody else in the district. It's more that I think the board realized they had this big project coming along because they have to build a tech center and a high school, and it's not going to be cheap. So I think they're trying to be as tight as they can on their budget. I think it's my guess is they'll probably do that for a couple of years. But again, I'm not part of that community, so I don't know for sure.
I went to a presentation and of the budget, and they've given a little block of money to each of the schools, and they're to use that to see if they can meet the things that that the weights addressed, and how they'll do that specifically. Did you hear that?
I saw something about that online. I didn't follow it close because I was kind of skimming quickly at that point.
So that it's the beginning of getting ready for the added tax capacity. and they want to
Yeah.
adhere to what the weighting study tried to accomplish.
So they're like little pilot chunks of money
Just,
or?
funds. I don't know if I call it pilot, it's
Okay.
just, here's money, and now how will you allocate it based on the weighted students?
Oh.
But for everyone,
Okay.
everyone will do better because, so if they had a literacy issue, and that would be addressed in the school, the beginnings of that, I thought it was fantastic, something that you all should hear. We did all that with them away.
Thanks for telling us.
So that reminds me, I have a business manager meeting in 2 weeks, I think, and so it'll be I guess it'll be the week of town meeting. Yeah, that's a week and a half. That'll be our meeting, I believe. And I'll talk to them about planning ahead for the FY '25 with the new weights. I'm still waiting for my data folks to get information to run those numbers for FY '24 this year that we're coming into. So that's kind of where those two things stand.
Okay. I want to make sure that we're able to plan for their planning before we run out of time.
Yeah, okay. I'll take.
Glad that you knew what that meant.
Yep.
Silly sentence, thank you. And how is the hiring for your new data people going?
I'm not sure if they have advertised for the new positions yet, for the, the actual 27 positions. But I know that we're asking for them in this budget. We've been talking about, what they're needed for, et cetera. So I think we have to wait until they're, we kind of know they're going to be approved before we can go out and hire. We won't have the money till June, July 1 anyway, assuming they are. So, but I assume they'll start advertising shortly before that, though. Hope.
Hope so too. Okay. Any other questions for Brad? Okay,
That was easy. We'll pass these around one more time.
thank you. It was a really good cookie.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you learn who made
Yeah,
Brad?
sure, Rabbit.
Brad.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. It's
And I
basically
think that we can go offline.